Hey folks, so welcome back. One of the things that often people who are wanting to get into playing with hardware samplers and vintage audio equipment of any kind wonder about and spend a lot of time thinking about is how can you actually get data on and off these things effectively and easily, considering the only kind of out of the box way of either getting data in or out is through the floppy drive. And most of us don't have floppies around, and frankly we haven't got that much time to wait for loading data up and in and out on floppies anyway. There's a number of different solutions that people use. I'm not going to go into too many of them today because the one, I want to do a video today about the solution I've chosen. But I do want to give an honourable mention to GoTech, which is the technology that replaces these drives, and you'll see these when you're buying any hardware sampler. Some of them already come with floppy drive emulators that allow you to put an SD card in there, and those SD cards will allow you to store maybe 100, 200, 300, depending on the size of the SD card, individual floppy images, which then individually can be loaded into the memory of the GoTech and then presented to the hardware sampler as a floppy disk. Whilst they are incredibly convenient, and having an SD card on the front panel that you can put in is brilliant, they do actually still only work as an emulated floppy disk, so you're still limited to the capacity of a floppy disk at any one time. You don't suddenly magically have a huge volume that you can play with. Fortunately, a lot of these samplers, certainly the 3000XL, which I'm sitting next to here, has a SCSI interface, and SCSI is a technology that allows for various different additions or attachments to be made to the sampler, most commonly of which are other storage mechanisms like hard drives or solid state drives, things like that. And SCSI has been around, it had its heyday when these samplers were around in the 90s. You'll remember things like iAmega zip drives and other things like that. They were, a lot of them were SCSI based and can still plug straight into these. But as with, most kind of vintage, equipment these days, the communities behind different technologies have found a new and interesting way of accessing this stuff. And at this point, I put my I waved to the crowd over on the Apple Mac forums, who have been diligently restoring Apple Mac hardware, very early Apple Mac hardware, and I think it was them that first came across the idea of using a Raspberry Pi to emulate a SCSI hard drive, and this gave birth to a project called RasSCSI, which has since moved on, and the current iteration that we use today is known as PiSCSI. And the PiSCSI is this thing sitting behind me here, and effectively it runs on a Raspberry Pi, and there's a little what's called a Raspberry Pi hat which sits on top of it and presents a DB25, which is the SCSI cable connector, which you plug into the back of the sampler, and the sampler sees it as a hard drive. In itself, it's incredibly easy to use, but today's video I just want to take you through a little bit about what that looks like. So I'm going to unplug my PiSCSI now, and I'll show you the different bits that go together to make it up. So I'm assuming that most of you will recognise at least one of these boards, most notably the Raspberry Pi. Been around for a while. I know recently they've had a whole bunch of hardware shortages that have been quite hard to get hold of, but they are incredible for the price that you get them for. This Raspberry Pi is actually a Raspberry Pi 3B, which I've had kicking around for a few years and not really had a home for, and it was the perfect thing to use for this project. It's not a board that I'm going to miss. It's going to be quite happy as my PiSCSI interface now forever. I'm not going to want to repurpose it for anything else. So it's found its calling in life. Now, this board is the PiSCSI itself, the PiSCSI hardware component, and you can get these in a couple of different configurations, and some of them suit the Raspberry Pi Mini, which is the smaller version. This is the standard form factor, but you can get ones that suit the smaller version. They all, will come with a DB25 SCSI port, and this one in particular I got from a team called Amiga Kit. And as I was saying, these kind of things are beloved of the kind of communities that restore vintage computing hardware, and that's why this team over here at Amiga Kit, which I'll link to in the description, have their own version of this as well, which is what I acquired. You can get them from lots of other places as well, and there are slight differences between them, but they all work and function in the same way. And this is what I was saying earlier. This is what's known as a Raspberry Pi hat, and it just literally connects to the Raspberry Pi like so. You press it down, there we go, and we're in. And then that provides us with a nice interface to the Raspberry Pi. Now, you go with the Raspberry Pi itself, you'll notice it's got an SD card in it. This is also really easy to do, and nothing to be afraid of. You go to the PiSCSI GitHub page, which again I'll link to, and you can download pre-built images for the Raspberry Pi, and then you can use a tool there are many tools that you can use to burn that image onto the SD card. Chuck it in here. I've got quite a high capacity SD card. This is a 128 gigabyte one, and they're going really cheap on Amazon at the moment, and it's a nice fast one as well. And that allows you to you put the PiSCSI software onto the SD card, and then you boot the Raspberry Pi up, and it presents itself as a hardware device on the SCSI bus. So I'll plug it back in, and we can show you it working, and you'll get a better idea of what these things look like. Okay, so we're back down here with the sampler. I've got the board here, the PiSCSI and the Raspberry Pi connected up, and the first thing we'll notice is that the sampler is turned off. Right, so we've got no power here. SCSI is a particularly sensitive interface, and these samplers have a little fuse inside them, which can often get blown if you do things like unplugging and plugging stuff in when power's on and everything. And a lot of the times that you'll see samplers for sale on eBay, especially Akai samplers that are for sale on eBay that said to be not working, or they hang on the loading page, is because the SCSI fuse is broken. This one down here, which I've just acquired in order to repair, that's got exactly that problem, and in a future video I'm going to show you how to replace the SCSI fuse. But the first thing to do whilst the power is off is I'm just going to plug the DB25 cable into the Raspberry Pi. I can't really show you this very well because the cables are all down the back of the desk, and I don't really want to pull it up. Once that's the DB25 is connected, and you know that everything's solid on the SCSI bus from that point of view, I'm going to power up the Raspberry Pi. So let's plug the USB cable in like so. There we are. And I need to plug that in to the power head. There we go. And it lights up like a Christmas tree. So I don't know if you can see that, but the Raspberry Pi there is nicely lit up. So I'm going to let that boot for a second, and then we'll power on the sampler and we'll see what we can find. Okay, so I've linked to the PiSCSI GitHub page in the description to this video, but there's a couple of things I just want to point out. So if you're looking for the downloads on the GitHub page, just scroll down to where it says releases over here on the right hand side, and if you click on the April 2023 release, which is the current release as of the time I'm recording this video, you'll be taken to the releases page. Now the releases page gives you instructions on how to get this onto your SD card for the Raspberry Pi, and it also tells you that there are two different pre-made images, one of which is for Raspberry Pis 3 and 4, which is most likely what you've got, and another one for older Raspberry Pis, the original generation of Raspberry Pis, if you want to use a super old version. It also gives you the default username and password for the Raspberry Pi, which is really important to know. But it also gives you another little tip here, which is you're going to need to connect your Raspberry Pi to your home Wi-Fi or to your studio's Wi-Fi. And to do that, you kind of need to, you're in a bit of a chicken and egg situation, because you can't connect to the Raspberry Pi until it's got internet connectivity, unless you plug, say, a monitor and a keyboard into it, which is entirely possible. But there's another way of doing this, which is relatively easy, and what I chose to do. So if you follow this link here, it says follow these steps to configure your access point and password after flashing, which means after putting the software onto the SD card, but then before you boot the Raspberry Pi for the first time. So if we look at this, it gives us, it takes us to the Raspberry Pi website. Again, I'll link this in the description, and it tells you how to create a file which you can put your SSID, the name of your home or studio Wi-Fi in, and then the password for that Wi-Fi, so that you can allow the Raspberry Pi to boot up already knowing how to connect to your home network, which is super, super cool. So that's something that you should really look at doing. And whilst we're here in front of the computer, I just wanted to point out that I am standing on the shoulders of giants for this. I learned everything I know from various sources, but for God's sake, check out Busy Bee. He's all over the Facebook Akai Samplers page, and he knows everything that's going on. So thanks to him for teaching me a lot about this stuff. So I'm going to go on now. I'm going to plug the Raspberry Pi in. It knows my home Wi-Fi, and once the page is up, we'll take you around the PiSCSI interface. Okay, so we're back down on floor level with the samplers. And yes, I do envy people who have them in a nice tall rack-mounted unit that's easy to access, but you know, here we are. You can see in the background that the PiSCSI's up and running. It's got its lights on, it's doing its thing. And so the next thing to do is to log into the interface and see what it's got. So what you do is, using a web browser, whether that be on your laptop, on a desktop computer, or even on a tablet, you can log into the either type PiSCSI into http://PiSCSI into your web browser, or you can put in, if you know it, the IP address that it's connected to your local network on. And I've got my laptop here, and if we look at the screen, you can see that this is what it looks like when we log in. Okay, so we're here on the PiSCSI control page, and SCSI is, as I said, I'm not going to go into details of it now, but it does allow you to have up to 7 devices connected to the SCSI bus. So one sampler can see at a maximum of 7 other devices that are connected to it, and that's what you can see on the screen here. ID 0 to 7 are the other different units that we could connect to the sampler. Below that are a bunch of files that we have, which you can and then use as an image and mount that image as a hard drive onto the sampler itself. So for instance, I could choose any one of these images here, and I could say, let's have maybe the very top one here. I'm going to give that an ID of 1 maybe, and I'm going to attach that as a disk drive. And now you can see that we've attached the first disk drive to ID 1, which is actually the second one. I've left ID 0 clear for now. The reason I do that is because I like ID 0 to be, rather than a sample CD, which most of the time is what you're going to be wanting to mount perhaps, I like ID 0 to be my own hard drive that I read and write to. So when I've processed a sample or I've captured a new sample, ID 0 is where I write that to. So I'm going to mount Jim HDS to ID 0 as well. There, attach that, and there we've now got 2 drives attached to the sampler. Obviously the sampler can't see them yet because it's not on, but when we power it up, we'll be able to cycle through both of those drives. Now, just for good measure, we can put another one on, and I'm gonna put this one on down here, which I think, if I remember right, is one of the Symphony of Voices samples. Ooh, I'll put that on 0. It won't let me put that on 0 because there's one already there. So let's go put that on 3. No, we'll put it on 2. And we can keep them in nice order. Cool, so we've got 3 on there now. So it's now time to power up the sampler itself and see what it can see. Cool. I'm going to zoom in on the screen a little bit so you guys can see what's going on there. So the first thing we can do is maybe go to the load button over here, and we can see what we're looking for. So first of all, it's looking for something off the floppy disk. We don't have a floppy in here, so we're going to hit F5, which is the SCSI option. And you can see that the S3000 always defaults to an ID of 5. So we want to change that. We've put drives on 0, 1, 2 and 3, so we want to select one of those. So let's select drive 2, ID 1, which is the second one first, and that is the Akai CD-ROM sample library volume 1. And let's just load and see what we can find in there. So here we've got a whole bunch of different samples that we can load in. You can see here that if I come down here, these ones have got a P next to them. That means they're programs. Whereas down here we've got a bunch that have got S's, and those are the actual samples that make it up. So if we wanted to, I mean, we could scroll through. There's loads of different ones on this sample CD, and maybe if we come a little bit further, Spaceballs. Let's have a listen to what Spaceballs looks like. So Spaceballs is a program, and we can choose to load the entire volume, which may or may not fit in the RAM depending on how much you've got. You can load all programs and samples, all programs only, and cursor programs and samples. So that's the one I want to load. So I'm going to load the program, and it will load in all the samples for that. Hit go, and then when we come back out, we can hit single again. We've now got the test program and Spaceballs in memory. Now, if I was to press the play button at the moment, which I could just press enter play on the sampler itself, it would actually play both of them. So let's just renumber them. So I'm going to go to a sequential renumber, set, and then exit. And now you can see that's they've got different numbers, so we've separated those programs out. And now I'm going to play program 2, which is Spaceballs. And if I just swing the camera across a little bit so you can see which buttons I'm pressing. Over here, this one just down here is the enter play button. So you can hear Spaceballs in all its glory. So let's load another one up just to check what we're doing. This time, rather than using any of these samples from the sound library, the Akai sound library, we'll hit up SCSI, and then we'll go back to ID2, which was the third one that I installed, which I think is Symphony of Voices, and we'll go and see what's going on over there. So we've got a whole bunch of different, these are women R's, O's, swells, octaves, lots of really crazy stuff going on over there. Let's go back and see what we've got over here. Maybe we'll just load in a choir, simple choir art, cursor, program samples, set go, and it's loading them in. This one might take a little bit of time because it's loading a whole sequence of stereo samples in. And there we go. Even with the maxed out memory in this unit, I've hit the maximum amount of free memory. I've got 0% free memory left, and we'll have to see where we go. So the good news is that it's probably loaded at least some of it in. So we need to renumber again because the choir has come in on program 1 again. So we've got 2 program 1s, which is fine in some contexts, especially if you want to play 2 samples together. But for me, I'm just going to renumber that sequentially again, hit set, exit, and then I'm going to change to program 2, which is the choir that we just loaded. And that sounds beautiful. That's a great choir sample. So Symphony of Voices. All these sample CDs can be downloaded from the Internet Archives for dubious copyright, I imagine. But there is a link that I can pass you to those as well if you want to get hold of them. But then, kind of the obvious one that we want to do as well is, rather than just reading, we want to be able to write to a hard disk as well. So that's kind of important. So we want to be able to save files. So if we're going to save files, you can't say, I mean, we've mounted these the things that we've just been loading from, they're mounted as hard drives, so you could save to them, but rather than mounting them as CDs. But I've got my own on ID0, which I can save any of the files that I like in there. So Space Bells, for instance, which I particularly liked, say I'd edited that, I'd gone into the samples, I'd fiddled with them, I'd filtered with them, I could save that out as a modified file onto the device attached to ID0 on the SCSI block, and keep the original completely clear. So I can just hit go. I'm going to save everything, the program and the samples, attached to the cursor, which is Space Bells at the moment, and so I can just hit go, and it's now saving the samples to ID0, which is my own file. Now if I go back single over here, we can delete from memory everything. Oops, delete, I aborted that then. We can go delete all, go and release all the samples. Yeah, and now we're back to just having the one test program in memory, just like we do when we load it up for fresh. But this time I can load, I can go to SCSI again. I'm on ID0, and this is my these are my own samples that I've found around, and you can see Space Bells is in there now, so that one got saved as well. So that's a quick tour on how to load and save files using PiSCSI on your S3000XL. It's a very simple operation, very similar operation on all different Akai samplers that use SCSI. You just follow the pattern on the screen, and it allows you to do it all. So we'll just go back up to the desk to wrap up, and I'll give you some closing thoughts. So there you have it. That's PiSCSI. I hope you found this video useful. I think it's a pretty neat take on using some of that vintage 90s tech, but with a very modern, cutting up to date interface that allows you to pretty much just drag and drop new sample CDs and mounted hard drives onto the device. Just pick them up and go with them. I think that's a lovely spin, and it really improves the workflow and making these samplers a lot more agile and a lot easier to use in a modern DAW environment. So if you like the video, please like and subscribe. I've got a whole bunch more S3000 videos to do. I'm going to do some repairs on one of them. I've got a new screen to fit. I've got to replace a SCSI fuse. So we're going to go and look at those in future videos, but also we're going to spend a bit of time playing with them as well and getting some sounds out of them. But I want to thank you for watching. Like I said, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.